Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today, things are going to get a little, well, creepy, a little too real maybe. We're tackling AI-generated content and how it's messing with our heads, like big time.
It's true, and it goes way beyond just seeing a weird image online and being like, hold on, is that photoshopped or what?
Right, like it's not just your friend's blurry concert pics anymore. This is different.
This is about a much deeper kind of doubt, the kind that makes you question, well, basically everything you see and hear.
Okay, so we're talking about a full-on trust crisis here, but
Yeah.
hasn't doubt always been, a thing? People have been lied to before.
Oh, absolutely. Doubt is as old as time itself, really. Think
Hmm.
back, way back, like ancient Rome, forged letters. Those were all the rage for political sabotage back then.
Wow, so fake news really is nothing new. But something tells me there's a reason we're talking about this now, right? What makes this wave of doubt different?
It's the sheer scale and accessibility of it all that's what's changed. I mean, these days, anyone with a laptop and an internet connection can whip up a pretty convincing deepfake.
That's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It is. We've gone way beyond governments and Hollywood using this tech. Now it's your neighbor, your coworker, maybe even like your dog walker who could be making these things.
So that fake news alert your aunt shared, it takes on a whole new meaning now.
Exactly. And it's not just some abstract problem either. This stuff has real-world consequences.
Give us an example.
Well, think about our legal system, right? Evidence, testimony, it all hinges on believing what we see and hear. What happens when any video, any audio recording could be faked?
Whoa, okay, so you're saying our whole justice system could get thrown into chaos.
There's a reason a whole panel of federal judges is trying to untangle this mess right now. It's a huge deal.
So are we all going to have to start bringing our phones to court to prove we actually ate that donut last Tuesday?
It might sound silly, but you're hitting on a very real issue. This tech makes us question the very foundation of how we trust and judge information. Think about how much we relied on photographs and videos in the 20th century for proof.
Right, like seeing is believing and all that.
Exactly, but now that foundation is crumbling and fast.
Okay, so it's way deeper than just questioning a single image or video. We're talking about questioning reality itself, aren't we?
In a way, yes, and some experts even call this a potential cultural singularity, this point where real and fake are so blurred it's basically impossible to tell them apart. And that leads to ideas like the dead internet theory, which is, well, even more unsettling.
Dead internet theory. Okay, now you have to tell us more about that.
So imagine a world where most of what you experience online, the comments, the content, even the trends, they aren't really driven by real people, at least not entirely.
Wait, you're saying it's all just bots and algorithms?
It's more like this growing suspicion that a lot of what we see online is inauthentic, driven by who knows what. Like that scene in spy movies where they swap the real microfilm for a fake what if that's happening constantly online, but with everything.
Oh, that's both kind of cool and totally freaky at the same time.
Right. And here's the kicker. It's not just that fake things exist, it's that their very existence makes us doubt the real stuff even more.
Whoa. So it's like knowing about this tech, it almost gives more power to anyone who wants to spread lies. Because even if you're telling the truth, people can just be like, nah, that's probably fake too.
You got it, and that right there is what we call the liar's dividend. The more we're aware of deepfakes, the more effective they actually become, even when they're not being used. It's like...
It's like the boy who cried wolf, but on a societal scale, right?
Exactly. The very act of becoming aware of the lie, it almost makes us more vulnerable, more likely to dismiss the truth.
And that actually makes me think about history. Because this whole deepfake thing, it gets even wilder when you start applying it to the past, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It changes everything, really.
Right. Because we rely so much on, like, old photos, documents, firsthand accounts, all that stuff to understand history.
And all of that can be manipulated now with AI. We're talking about potentially rewriting the past with a few clicks.
See, that's what freaks me out. Questioning a video online now, that's one thing, but history, that's supposed to be, set in stone.
And it always has been. But now it's not that simple. I mean, we're already seeing attempts to create deepfakes that supposedly prove historical events happened differently than we thought, or even to discredit real documents.
Yeah, and how do you even argue with that? It's not like we can hop in a time machine and fact-check a deepfake from the 1800s.
Exactly. And that's the real danger here. Even if a deepfake is debunked, even if we know it's fake, that initial seed of doubt, it lingers.
So people might start questioning things they always believed were true just because of a convincing fake.
It happens all the time, and once that trust is broken, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. It's like trying to put back together a shattered vase. You might have all the pieces, but it'll never be quite the same.
That's a pretty bleak outlook. So what are we supposed to do? Just give up and say, well, I guess history is up for grabs now.
Definitely not. This is where everything we've been talking about, those critical thinking skills, they become even more crucial.
So we have to be like historians and detectives now.
In a way, yeah. Don't just blindly accept what you see or read. Interrogate the information. Who created it? What's their angle? Do other sources back it up? And if something seems fishy, well, dig a little deeper.
It's like being back in school, but way more intense. Like failing this test means you misunderstand the whole world, not just one history lesson.
It's true. And that's why being aware of this potential for manipulation is so important, especially with history. We can't just blindly trust what we see or read anymore.
Okay, so no more blind trust. But how do we actually avoid falling into these deepfake traps, especially when it comes to history?
Well, first off, never rely on just one source. Look for information from multiple perspectives, compare different accounts, look for inconsistencies, and be wary of anything that feels too sensational, too good or bad to be true.
So basically channel your inner fact checker.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of context. Try to understand the bigger picture. What was going on when this event happened? What were the social norms, the political climate, all of it? Because a photo, even a real one,
Can be taken out of context to spin a whole different narrative.
exactly. And with deepfakes, that becomes even easier to do. So yeah, you got to be extra cautious.
Which makes me think back to that whole liar's dividend thing. It's like the more we learn about deepfakes, the more powerful that tool becomes, even for people trying to rewrite history.
Unfortunately, that's true. And it's not always about intentional manipulation either. Sometimes people spread misinformation without even realizing it, especially if they haven't, sharpened those critical thinking skills.
It's not enough to just be suspicious of everything. We need to be more mindful, more discerning about the information we consume, especially when it comes to history.
I think that's a really important point. It's not about being cynical, it's about being an active participant in how we understand the past, not just a passive consumer of whatever's put in front of us.
So we're not powerless in all of this.
Not at all. We actually have more tools than ever to be critical thinkers. We can question, we can dig deeper, we can demand more reliable information. And that's pretty empowering, don't you think?
I do. But all this questioning and doubting, it can get kind of exhausting,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just history that's affected by this stuff. Our whole way of living, interacting, it's all different now.
Okay, so we've talked about how this impacts our view of history, but how does this deep doubt actually change the way we live our lives now?
Well, I think that's the big question, isn't it? How do we function in a world where any image, any video, anything could be, well, fake? It's like the rules of the game has changed, and we're all still trying to figure out how to play, right? And it's not just online either. It's news, it's politics. Heck, even just trusting what you see on the street, it feels like this deepfake stuff, it seeps into every corner of our lives.
It does, and it's easy to just throw your hands up and say, that's it, I can't trust anything anymore. But that's not really a sustainable way to live, is it?
Definitely not. So what's the alternative? How do we operate in a world where any piece of information could be a lie?
I think it starts with maybe a shift in mindset. We have to accept that we're not always going to have all the answers, that absolute certainty, it's becoming harder and harder to come by.
So embrace the unknown.
In a way, yes. Because if we already knew everything for sure, wouldn't life be a little boring? That element of uncertainty, of questioning, it's what keeps us curious, keeps us learning.
I like that. But how do we walk that line between healthy skepticism, questioning things, and just becoming completely cynical?
It's a balance, for sure. It's not about dismissing everything you see, but it's also not about blindly accepting everything at face value either. You've got to engage those critical thinking skills.
So instead of, is this real or fake, it's, okay, who's saying this? What's their deal? What other perspectives are out there?
Exactly. Be your own detective. Gather the evidence, look for inconsistencies, don't be afraid to ask questions.
And be adaptable, right? Because this tech is always changing. What works to spot a deepfake today might not work tomorrow.
It's a constantly evolving landscape, but that's part of what makes it so fascinating. We're all figuring this out as we go.
So if you had to pick one skill, the most important one for navigating this new world, what would it be?
Critical thinking, hands down. Being able to assess information objectively, even when it's about something you care deeply about, even if it confirms what you already believe. That's crucial.
They're being brave enough to change your mind when presented with new information, even if it means admitting you were wrong.
Absolutely. And I know that can be really tough, but it's how we grow. It's how we get closer to, well, the truth.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we go?
Don't be afraid to be skeptical. Don't be afraid to ask those tough questions. And most importantly, never stop learning. This journey, figuring out what's real in a world of deepfakes, it's just beginning.
It's a wild ride for sure. Stay curious, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.